Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at the top 10 richest rulers in history. Before we start, I want you to hit that red subscribe button so you never miss out on any of our videos. With that being said, let's get right into it. At number 10, Mansa Musa. Mansa Musa, the king of Timbuktu, is often referred to as the wealthiest person in history. According to Ferrum College history professor Richard Smith, Musa's West African kingdom was likely the largest producer of gold in the world, at a time which gold was in especially high demand. But just how rich was Musa? Since there's really no way to put an accurate number on his wealth, records are scarce, if non-existent, and contemporary sources describe the king's riches in terms that are impossible for the time. Some tales of his famous pilgrimage to Mecca, during which Musa's spending was so lavish that it caused a currency crisis in Egypt, mention dozens of camels each carrying hundreds of pounds of gold. Smith says 1 year of Malayan gold production probably generated about a ton. Others said Musa's army consisted of 200,000 men, including 40,000 archers, troop numbers even modern superpowers would have a difficult time bringing to the field. At number 9, Augustus Caesar. Not only was Caesar in charge of an empire that accounted for 25 to 30% of the world's economic output, but according to Stanford history professor Ian Morris, Augustus at one point held personal wealth equivalent to 1/5 of his empire's economy. That fortune would be the equivalent of about $4.6 trillion in 2019. For a while, Morris adds, Augustus personally owned all of Egypt. That's pretty hard to top.
Guards can keep my enemies away, they can do nothing about my friends.
I rather tell thee what is to be feared than what I fear, for always I am Caesar.
At number 8, Emperor Shenzong. China's Song dynasty, 960 to 1279, was one of the most economically powerful empires of all time, and according to Professor Ronald A. Edwards, a Chinese economic historian of the Song dynasty at Tamkang University, the nation accounted for between 25 and 30% of the world's economic output during its peak. The empire's wealth came from both its technological innovations and extreme skill at tax collection, which Edwards says was hundreds of years ahead of European governments. The professor also noted the Song dynasty's government was highly centralized, meaning the emperor held enormous control over the economy. At number 7, Akbar, the greatest emperor of India's Mughal dynasty. Akbar controlled an empire that accounted for about 1/4 of global economic output. Fortune's Chris Matthews cites the late economic historian Angus Maddison, who speculates India's GDP per capita under Akbar was comparable to Elizabethan England, but with a ruling class whose extravagant lifestyle surpassed that of the European society. That assertion that India's elite class was wealthier than their counterparts to the West is backed up by data from economist Branko Milanovic, whose research shows the Mughal dynasty was one of the most effective empires of all time at extracting wealth from the population. At number 6, Joseph Stalin. Stalin is an uncommon figure in modern economic history, a dictator with absolute power who also controlled one of the largest economies in the world. Whilst it's virtually impossible to separate Stalin's wealth from the wealth of the Soviet Union, his unique combination of economic might and complete control of the USSR lead multiple economists to nominate him as one of the richest people of all time. And you can easily see their logic. Data from the OECD shows that in 1950, 3 years before Stalin's death, the USSR made up roughly 9.5% of global economic output. As of 2019, that level of production would be equivalent to nearly $7.5 trillion. At number 5, Andrew Carnegie. Rockefeller gets all the press, but Andrew Carnegie may be the richest American of all time. The Scottish immigrant sold his company, US Steel, to JP Morgan for $480 million in 1901. That sum equates to about slightly over 2.1% of US GDP at the time, giving Carnegie economic power equivalent to $372 billion in 2019. At number 4, John D. Rockefeller. Rockefeller began investing in the petroleum industry in 1863, and by 1880 his Standard Oil Company controlled 90% of American oil production. According to his New York Times obituary, Rockefeller was valued at about $1.5 billion based on a 1918 federal income tax return and estimates his overall fortune, the equivalent to almost 2% of US economic output that year according to data compiled by Measuring Worth. The same economic share in 2019 will be equivalent to $341 billion. At number 3, Alan Rufus, aka Alan the Red. The nephew of William the Conqueror, Rufus joined his uncle in the Norman Conquest. He died with £11,000, according to Philip Beresford and Bill Rubenstein, authors of The Richest of the Rich, which they say amounted to 7% of England's GDP at the time. That would amount to around about $194 billion in 2018. At number 2,
William the Conqueror, 1028 to 1087, $229.5 billion. William I, by name William the Conqueror, or William the Bastard, or William of Normandy, French Guillaume la Conquérate, or Guillaume la Bâtard, or Guillaume de Normandy, born in 1028 in Falsa-les-Normandy in France, died September 9, 1087 in Rouen, Duke of Normandy as William II from 1035, and King of England as William I from 1066, one of the greatest soldiers and rulers of the Middle Ages. He made himself the mightiest noble in France and then changed the course of England's history by his conquest of that country.
At number 1, Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan is undoubtedly one of the most successful military leaders of all time. As leader of the Mongol Empire, which at its height stretched from China to Europe, he controlled the largest contiguous empire in history. However, despite his great power, scholars say Genghis never hoarded his wealth. On the contrary, the Khan's generosity was key to his influence. One of the bases of his success is sharing the spoils with his soldiers and other commanders, says Maurice Rasabi, a distinguished professor of history at CUNY's Queen's College. And that's all for today, folks. I hope you liked the video. If you did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another amazing video from us. Until next time.